Today on The Journey with Steve DeWitt.
Man's desire to manage his own life and to fix his own problems can only depress us because eventually life overwhelms us. Even the smartest, richest, most capable amongst us eventually will not be able to solve the matrix of life's problems. Paul says that's the starting point when it comes to dealing with the struggles and the troubles and the temptations of life. Not me, but God.
Do you ever feel alone in your struggles? Well, you're not alone. Today on The Journey, Pastor Steve DeWitt offers hope from one of the Bible's most cherished verses. He'll unpack 1 Corinthians 10:13, revealing God's faithfulness in our trials. We're learning why our challenges aren't unique and how God always provides a way of escape. It's a message from the Unity First series, and you can access this complete study online at thejourney.fm. Now here's Pastor Steve DeWitt with the start of a message titled, God is Faithful.
Our study in 1 Corinthians brings us today to one of the most cherished verses in all of the Bible. This is a verse that millions of Christians down through the years have lingered over in their times of difficulty and have found great help and comfort in the truth that it teaches us. Now, why do we need comfort? Well, if you've been tracking with what we've been studying here, Paul has really basically taken the Corinthians behind the woodshed and has just been whooping on them and saying, what are you doing? What are you thinking? Don't you realize that you are going the way of the Israelites in what they did and the mistakes that they made? They were in danger of walking the same destructive path. We have seen that pride, spiritual pride, a sense of privilege, a sense of being special, which the Israelites clearly had, and the Corinthians had as well, blinded them to the precariousness of their situation, and they were in danger of falling. And that's why verse 12, Paul writes, "Take heed lest you fall." And so it's been very strong, and I don't know how much you have felt the power and the sternness of the warnings that Paul has been making, but these are very strong exhortations that he has been giving. We talked last week about spiritual vertigo and what happens to us when temptation gets a hold of us. That in those moments especially, we are in a dangerous situation because when I suddenly face temptation, my spiritual equilibrium inside gets all messed up, and things that I used to see clearly, I don't see as clearly anymore. And that is why on the other side of some devastating sin, we look at ourselves in the mirror and we say, how did I ever do something like that? I never thought it would happen to me, and all the rest. That's what temptation does. It throws us all out of whack, and we do some of the dumbest things. Good place for an amen. We do some of the dumbest things, say some of the dumbest things, lust after some of the stupidest things, covet in other people's lives some of the most inane things. We get our affections set on some of the most worthless, nonsensical things. Can I go on? We just get all stupid, don't we? Temptation makes us stupid. I read this week Plantinga who said that sin is self-abuse. Sin is self-abuse. If you're involved in sin and you are in rebellion against God in some area and you think you're getting away with it and you think that you can do it and nobody knows and everything's fine, we do not break the 10 Commandments, they break us. Okay? Sin destroys us, and only in temptation and the stupidity of that would we see it otherwise. So that's why when we come now, we get to the end of verse 12, be careful lest you fall, look out. It would be easy for us to give into this sense of like, well, I guess the way that I need to live now is I need to cut off my cable and I'm not going out of the house anymore and I'm going to cuddle in a blanket in my bedroom in a dark room until I die. Because otherwise I'm facing temptation and I'll never make it. And we can become paralyzed by fear. And Paul recognized the strength of what he has been saying, and he takes a moment now and he gives a very pastoral word, very much a word of comfort and a word of hope so that we do not feel overwhelmed. And so here is the verse. Many of you know this verse. Here's what it says. 1 Corinthians 10:13. It's all we're studying today, just this one verse. No temptation has overtaken you that is not common to man. God is faithful and will not let you be tempted beyond your ability, but with the temptation will also provide a way of escape that you may be able to endure it. One of the challenges of teaching from a familiar passage is that many of you, just like me, have known this verse for a very long time. I learned this verse in Awana, I believe, by memory when I was a kid. I've probably known this verse by heart for like 35 years now. And when we come to think verses that we've known for a long time, there can be subtly in our heart this sense that I already know that. I already got this figured out. And I can tell you, before this weekend, I don't think I have really understood what this verse actually was saying. I have learned this week in my studies from this verse new things. And so I want to encourage you right now, don't settle in and think, I've heard this before. Let's come at this from a fresh perspective, and I think God will have something for us. Deal? Remember the context? The context is warning. The warnings that Paul has given about falling. And here now we have a word of comfort. Rather than being paralyzed by fear, there is a better way. And it begins with a recognition, first of all, that when I am overtaken by some kind of a temptation or a trouble, that I am not the first one to ever face this. That is what he says at the beginning of the verse. No temptation has overtaken you that is not common to man. Now, the word there for temptation, the Greek word, it doesn't exactly mean temptation the way that we typically mean temptation. When somebody says, I am facing temptation, for us in our common vernacular, we think that in the negative. Like I've got some kind of an evil that I am thinking about doing or that I am feeling a desire to do. The word here, it actually means, it can include temptation, but it really means to test or to prove. You could put in the word struggle or maybe challenge, something like that, trial. Now, doesn't that make this verse mean something a little bit different than maybe you've thought? There is no struggle that you will ever face that is not common to man. There is no trial that you will ever face that somebody else hasn't already gone through, such as is common to man. And I think that that is intended to be a comfort to us because typically when we are in the midst of some great pain or some great sorrow or whatever it might be, we typically think to ourselves, nobody has ever felt this way before. I am the first one who has ever gone through this, and nobody else can understand the pain of my heart and the grief that I feel and all the rest. Paul says, listen, there are billions of people that have lived on this planet. And all of us suffer the same human condition, living in a broken world. We all are going through the same kinds of trials. Now, they may not be circumstantially exactly the same, but the pain and the trouble and the struggle that all of us are going through is as real to us as mine are to me. We are in this together, would be another way to translate this. And all of us are dealing with the same kinds of struggles. Nobody rises to a level of spirituality where now, you know what? There is the common man struggle, and then there is the pastor struggle. Because I am so much, more spiritual, or maybe you're the head of your family, or you're the son of a preacher, or son of a deacon, and we know what happens to them. So maybe that's not a good illustration, but we can have this sense of superiority or exclusiveness or I'm special. And Paul says, listen, we're all sinners and we're all living in the same sicko world and we all face the same kinds of temptations. We are in this together. I am not alone in it. The pain has been felt before. My trials are not unique. Now, how is this helpful? Think of this. Is it helpful to consider that before me, millions of Christians specifically have faced this same kind of temptation and trial and struggle, and God has brought them through. Now, I don't know if I said that with the proper force. Let me try it again. Think of this. There isn't a single one of us who are facing a single thing that God doesn't have centuries of experience bringing people just like us through successfully. Yeah, that is a good news. Because again, when we experience something, we wonder, can I make it through this? Is God going to get me through this thing? Because it feels to us so unique and nobody really has done it before. No, tons of people have. And God is really, really good at not letting the righteous fall and helping us to persevere. Now, this is a little bit of a silly illustration. I'm admitting this, but maybe it'll help. When I was in junior high, so we're going back like decades to when I was in junior high, the school that I went to, this is the way they did it back in the Stone Age when I was in school. We didn't have middle school and high school. We had junior high and high school. And so junior high was 7th, 8th, and 9th, and then high school was 10th, 11th, 12th. Now they've switched it up, but that's the way that they did it. So I remember when I was in junior high, so I'm now in 9th grade, I was thinking about what it was going to be like to move up to the big high school. And on the outside, I'm cool as a cucumber about it. Problem. Inside, I'm all, I was nervous about it because I would occasionally be around the high school and see kind of what it was like, and it was big and it was loud, and the guys after school in their cars peeling rubber around the roast, people screaming and all that, and guys with hair under their arms, and which I was a late bloomer, okay, and the whole thing was just kind of terrifying to me. And I remember in 9th grade thinking about a guy that was a year older than me and who had already gone up to the high school. His name was John. And John was kind of a geek sort of guy. He was given an unflattering nickname, which I will not mention, in the school. Just one of these guys, didn't have a lot on the ball. And I saw him, after he'd gone to the high school, I'd see him around, and he had friends, and he seemed happy. And I remember thinking to myself in 9th grade, if John can do it, so can I. If John can do it, so can I. And spiritually speaking, this is what Paul is getting at for us. Since my trial is common, and millions have faced the same kind of thing, and if they, by God's grace, not in their own power, but by God's grace, if they have gotten through this, then by God's grace, so can I. So can I. Take heart. Be encouraged. There are tremendous burdens that are in this room this morning. If you remember when we had our prayer service some weeks ago, and we let people just anonymously text in the prayer requests, do you remember I was kind of shocked actually at the seriousness of the burdens that were in that room. And no doubt that is true here today. And I want to say to your encouragement what this verse is saying to us, that it doesn't matter what you are going through, somebody else has gone through it before. And there is somebody else who's gone through it that God has enabled them to get through it. And if you will access the resources that God provides, so can you. So take heart. Take heart. We're in it together. And God is for us. He wants to see us get through it. Which really then gets to the second point, and I would say this is the foundation of the entire thing that Paul is saying here. It is the character of God. And what does he pick? Not his love, although that is wonderful. Not his mercy, fantastic. Not his all-knowing, that's wonderful as well. The verse says this: God is faithful. Okay? God is faithful. Not God was faithful. That's easy to see. He has been faithful in the past. He is faithful, which means that is always true. Tomorrow, when you get up in the morning, the is present tense. It'll be true tomorrow and next week and next year. He is eternally faithful. You know, our real temptation when we are facing something, we're just feeling overwhelmed by something, is this sense that I cannot do this. This is more than I can handle. And in those moments, what do we want to do? We want to get out, don't we? Have you ever had a trial where you like to sleep because while you're sleeping, you're glad that you don't have to feel the pain of what you're going through? I have been there. I love to sleep in the midst of that particular trial. It helped me get away. If you're here today and you're thinking, you know what? I did not sign up for the life circumstance that I am in right now. I want to get out from this. Let me off the train. I'm done. I would suggest to you that the majority of the responses like that come from a fundamentally erroneous approach. That was badly said, but we're doing it wrong, okay? When we get feeling that way, typically that is because the starting point for my solution finding is me. Me. I need to figure this out. I need to come up with the resources to get through this. I need to fix this. I need to trust in my strength, in my wisdom, in my ability to make it happen. I need to lean on my own understanding. And whenever we approach the trials of life from this perspective, we will feel overwhelmed because what is true of us? We are fickle. And we are wishy-washy, and we are weak, and we cannot solve the problems in life. We have very little ability to do much of anything. And so when I begin these massive problems that come, I've got to do this. I can only be discouraged because I know myself too well. Self-dependence will fail us. Our fallen nature always wants to do it our own way, though. I thought of a poem. It's a famous poem by William Ernest Henley, who wrote a poem called Invictus. Many of you know the poem Invictus, and I'd like to read this poem to you. This is a popular creed for man's autonomy, man's ability to manage his own life. This is what Henley wrote. Out of the night that covers me, black is the pit from pole to pole, I thank whatever gods may be for my unconquerable soul. In the fell clutch of circumstance, I have not winced nor cried aloud. Under the bludgeonings of chance, my head is bloody but unbowed. Beyond this place of wrath and tears looms but the horror of the shade, and yet the menace of the years finds and shall find me unafraid. And here is the famous portion of the poem. It matters not how straight the gate, how charged with punishments the scroll. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. And you hear there in that Henley refusing to believe that anybody but self is going to be in charge, that I am the captain, I am the master, which is, of course, horribly ironic. Because where is Henley right now? Dead. He's dead. So much for being the master of your fate, huh? He's dead. Timothy McVeigh, as I understand it, Timothy McVeigh, when he was executed in the Terre Haute federal prison, by lethal injection, as he was going out, as he was dying, he was quoting this poem. Again, man's desire for autonomy. As he is dying, I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. Man's desire to manage his own life and to fix his own problems can only depress us because eventually life overwhelms us. Even the smartest, richest, most capable amongst us eventually will not be able to solve the matrix of life's problems. And if you're not there yet, you will be, and maybe and ultimately this is true for death. Figure out death on your own and you'll have done something nobody else has. Eventually, life overwhelms us. The Christian response to this is the antithetical one. So the human response, the secular response is the autonomy of man, the greatness of man. You figure it out. You are the one who takes care of yourself. The Christian response, and what does that lead to? Depression, death, no answers there. The Christian response is the opposite of that. It is not that I provide the resources or my wisdom figures this out. It begins with a different starting point. It begins with God. It begins with God, and specifically, it begins with what is true about his character. Here, Paul says, he is faithful. Faithful. Now, I got to this point in my preparation, and I thought, okay, I'm going to look up some verses on God's faithfulness and just kind of check this out a little bit. So I went to Nave's topical study on the subject of God's faithfulness, and this is what I found. And I thought, I don't want to look up all those verses. And maybe just showing you all of these, and there's probably many more, should say something. What does God in his word want us to realize about what he is like? He is a faithful God. He is trustworthy. He is not wishy-washy like we are. He is steady. He is the same. He doesn't change. As the song that we sang a moment ago, he is unchangeable. He is unshakable. He is unstoppable. This is because of who he is. Our God is a faithful God. And Paul says that's the starting point when it comes to dealing with the struggles and the troubles and the temptations of life. Not me, but God. And what about God? He's faithful. He's faithful. So this is the issue when it comes to how I'm going to work through this trial. And if you're in a trial right now, listen carefully. When I orient the trial around myself, and I lean towards the things that are true to me or make sense to me, I am going in a direction that will lead to fear, overwhelming sense, depression, and despair. Because I cannot do this. I am fallible. What we must do is begin our solving, our working through these things with the character of God, and to bring that into my mind and my conscience and my heart, and to pray and to meditate and to consider what is true about the God who loves me. And that is that he is faithful. Faithful to his promises, faithful to his people, and specifically in those promises, he has promised that he who begun a good work in you will carry it unto completion. That this thing will not be my Waterloo. It will not be the end of me. Why? Not because of me, but because of God.
God's faithfulness is the foundation of our hope. What a comforting reminder. You're listening to The Journey with Steve DeWitt and the start of a message titled, God is Faithful. To replay this lesson, visit thejourney.fm. Well, here on The Journey, we're committed to fostering a community united in faith and spiritual growth. And as we near the end of our Unity First series, we're excited to introduce a resource that aligns perfectly with our mission. Good to Great in God's Eyes, 10 Practices Great Christians Have in Common by Chip Ingram. This thoughtful guide explores 10 spiritual practices shared by Christians throughout history who've made a lasting impact on their communities and the world. But rather than focus on individual greatness, we see this book as a celebration of our collective journey in faith. This book offers practical insights drawn from Scripture, personal anecdotes, and inspiring examples of faith in action. It's designed to help all of us deepen our spiritual lives, strengthen our families, nurture our relationships, and live out our calling with purpose. What makes this book truly special is its emphasis on timeless spiritual disciplines that have united believers across generations. As we face the challenges of our modern world, we can draw inspiration from shared practices that have guided and sustained our faith community through the ages. We're offering Good to Great in God's Eyes as a thank you for your support of the journey. Your generous gift helps us continue providing resources that strengthen our unity in Christ and encourage spiritual growth for believers around the world. To receive your copy, just call 844-7-JOURNEY. That's 844-756-8763. Or give online at thejourney.fm. And if you'd like to see Steve DeWitt teach in person, then plan a weekend visit to Bethel Church. We're located in Crown Point, Indiana, with campuses in Cedar Lake and Hobart. Find directions and more at bethelweb.org. Well, that's all our time for today. I'm Tim Svoboda, inviting you to join us next time for more teaching from Pastor Steve DeWitt here on The Journey. Today's program was produced and furnished by Bethel Church in Crown Point, Indiana.